Althea McKenzie, it's now time for us to join our very special guest, Dr. Arun Kashyap, UN Resident Coordinator, Resident Representative of the United Nations Development Program for Jamaica, the Bahamas, Bermuda, the Turks and Caicos, and Cayman Islands. Dr. Kashyap, good morning. Happy New Year to you. Welcome back to Independent Talk. How are you?
Good morning, Ms. McKenzie. I'm very well. Happy New Year to you, too. And thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you on with us, and we have quite a bit to get through. So I'm going to see how best we can deal with a range of issues that we want to talk to you about this morning.
Sure.
I want to begin, first of all, by having you explain to us why 2015 is such a significant year for the UN.
Well, 2015 is the year when United Nations, after the Millennium Summit in 2000, they had said that by 2015 we'll meet the 8 Millennium Development Goals. By the end of this year, we will be measuring where we are with those goals. And we have done, I must confess, very significant progress in reducing the number of people living at the margins of poverty and malnutrition. And across the board, in some areas, the progress has not been as much, but that's what also makes 2015 very special. That, okay, Millennium Development Goals will be met this year. What happens after 2015?
Okay.
And this is the year when all the governments are going to approve the post-2015 agenda, which is in the form of Sustainable Development Goals. And in these goals, the special thing, there are a couple of very special points. One is, for the first time, unlike the Millennium Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals will be universal. Second thing is this time these goals have been formulated, of course, by the countries in close consultation with people, including those whose future we want to improve. In other words, what kind of world are we looking forward to for each one of us? And lastly, there are several meetings that are going to take place, from Hyogo Protocol onwards. But the most important is, this year we expect to have a new climate change agreement with the governments. The meeting will be in Paris, so in December we are hoping that all this progress that have been made, including in Lima at the COP20, that how all countries will come together and decide collectively as to what we need to do to take care of this, one of the greatest challenges of development.
Yeah. Ever wondered, Dr. Kashyap, and I know you must be looking back at the work of the UN over these past 70 years, what would have happened had there not been such an organization that really was there looking out for the needs and the rights of individuals and of people of all races, of all creeds, of all cultures and colors?
I'm with you 100%. That UN is an institution that is absolute necessity for all of us. And given as the world is evolving, when we started to where we were in terms of quality of life of the individuals, in terms of access to goods and services, in terms of having famines, impact of disasters, then we were hit with HIV/AIDS and what we did in the area of AIDS. Then we go on, and recently the whole issue of Ebola and the new problem of terrorism, the issues of security. All these issues, UN becomes a forum. UN doesn't decide anything. UN doesn't tell anyone, but UN becomes a forum which brings the world together, different thoughts, feelings, and then guides us as to how we can move together. One of the central issue of this is that all the programs are very much articulated on human rights agenda. I mean, our development programs are called human rights-based development. And in respecting those human rights, and I must, say this to the credit of Jamaica, that I always say this, that the Human Rights Day was very much with the role Jamaica played, not only in getting human rights to the prominence, but also with the apartheid, to until now. I do believe the government is very keen to, but looking at the human rights development agenda to then taking care of these marginalized populations. Including this year, I should have also mentioned that if you listen, you must have, been listening to the Davos, what's going on there. But one of the major things that's happening is, again, inequality is becoming a very, very important issue. For the third year in a row. And now the inequality is such that 1% of the people, let's say about 75 people who are accounting for over 50% of the global wealth. Now, UN system is ready to, of course, work with the countries to see what kind of strategies we would be requiring, independent of, other issues of what national capitalist systems or otherwise we work under. But the important thing is, if we don't take care of the inequality, we will not be able to achieve poverty, conflicts will increase, and so on and so forth. And this is not limited only to developing countries, but to the developed world as
And while we're trying to discuss every country, I'm really interested in how the UN has been contributing to Jamaica.
Yes, and that is very important. That's why I'm here, and that's why our team is here. You're absolutely. This is a very important question, and I am really grateful to you for the opportunity given to us to have this conversation with you. We've been in Jamaica now since, I think, 75, 76, and since then, UN has been working very closely with the government to formulate development programs in line with the national priorities and working closely with the government how we achieve those priorities. And over this period, Jamaica has changed a lot. Jamaica has made progress, but circumstances have also changed. The problems emerging have been different. So in addition to seeing what areas UN can focus on, we have also kept abreast with what new changes are requiring from the UN, how we're going to assist the government. To give you some recent examples, today there are about 21 agencies that work in Jamaica, UN agencies. If I also include intergovernmental agencies, like IOM, ISA, and also, then multilateral banks and IMF, we are close to about 25. In all this, there are about 9 resident agencies, starting with the UNDP, which I also head as the resident representative. We have UNICEF, UN Population Fund, UNAIDS, and I can list all of them. Now, each of these agencies brings its comparative advantage to the fore, whereas the issues of children. Recently we were reading about, Minister Lisa Hanna at CRC, update reports in Geneva and what, she was presenting the status of children in Jamaica. And UN works very closely in all this. In all this, we also make sure that human rights agenda gets formulated very, very critically. We work through what we create, a United Nations Development Action Framework. That is formulated very closely with the government, very closely by engaging other stakeholders, by making sure we are addressing those priorities. That's part of the reason why we work very, very closely with the government. That also brings to the agenda that how we can also make sure that all assistance that's coming to Jamaica, we are working together. We try to synergize those particular activities. That's not an easy process. It's an ongoing process, but our efforts are certainly directed towards that.
Yes.
Just one more thing, and I will stop for this question. That there are, at this time, in addition to what I mentioned, individual UN agencies' comparative advantages, there are 4 activities that we are doing jointly, because the governments, which includes Government of Jamaica, have given direction to the United Nations that we as agencies need to work together. As our Secretary General says, we need to deliver together. So we are increasingly trying to work together to say how we approach development as an integrated proposition. So HIV/AIDS is absolutely normal fit in this, because even UNAIDS is called all UN agencies working on HIV/AIDS. So that's a common program we have. We also have a common program on elimination of violence against gender and other vulnerable communities. We also have a joint program in the process which is being formulated is on human rights, and we're delighted that Government of Jamaica has agreed to now have a national human rights institution. We also have a joint program on sexual and reproductive health, and we are trying to formulate a program at this time on sustainable water management, which will also be a joint program.
Which couldn't have come at a better time, given the challenges that we had last year with the drought and the fact that we're being told that this year we're going to have another difficult year. So these issues really go to the heart of not only how it is that as a country we can grow and develop, but certainly how each community can work together to build on the legacy that other people have left behind, and on the work of some of the projects, the backs of some of the projects put in place by the United Nations.
That's a very important point that you have made. Jamaica is the land of wood and water. So sometimes I think do we actually have a water shortage, or it's an issue of water management? And that's something number of, even government is looking at it and others are looking at it. And two things become very important. One is we synergize amongst the activities that are ongoing by engaging, as you very rightly say, Ms. McKenzie, and that is how we engage the communities. How we engage the stakeholders, because it is their lives and livelihoods that are dependent on that water. And then also building upon the lessons that we have already learned. And with climate change, it is very clear that the issue of water, which very much relates to health, is going to become extremely important.
Okay. I'm Althea McKenzie. My guest at this time, Dr. Arun Kashyap, UN Resident Coordinator, Resident Representative, the United Nations Development Program, Jamaica, the Bahamas, Bermuda, the Turks and Caicos, and the Cayman Islands. And Dr. Kashyap, thank you very much for staying with us.
My pleasure.
I want to focus now on the role and the scope of the UN Resident Coordinator Office in Jamaica. What is that role and the scope of the work that is being done?
Right. The UN Resident Coordinator is actually Secretary General's representative in the country. In my case, these are 5 countries that I cover. Okay. I essentially present my credentials only to Jamaica, and I work at the request of the government in the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, Cayman Islands, and Bermuda. This is, as I mentioned earlier, that synergy of United Nations at a country level will be realized once we all start working together. The main reason behind this is development is a very integrated process. When we are leading our lives, each agency is playing a certain role, and the challenge and the opportunity for us is how we bring it all together. Now, this is the guidance we also get from the countries through General Assembly and ECOSOC. That those are the guidance, and every 4 years we come up with, the recent one was what was called the Quadrennial Comprehensive Policy Review, which very clearly said how we need to operate at a country level, and that becomes the role of the resident coordinator to make sure that we are fulfilling the obligations that have been put by the governments on the United Nations, which are transmitted to me through my bosses in New York. Okay. So all agencies, we have their representatives who head those agencies. My role then becomes is how we are coordinating these agencies. We have what you'll find is each agency has a very competent, capable, and very committed heads of agencies who know their subjects very well. And they are the ones who, through their teams, then bring those activities together. How we operate is we have monthly United Nations country team meetings where we sit down for if we were going to have United Nations Development Action Framework, the new one. This one would finish in 2016, and this year in 2015 we'll also start formulating from the next period from now 2016 to 2020, 2017 to 21. So all those roles to make sure that we are coordinated, we are working together, and if there are any issues that come up that pertain, if government has any comments or any suggestions or anything they need to pass through or they need any advice, that becomes my role, that I work very closely with the government to make sure that I am keeping them informed of all what UN is doing across the board through its activities, through its use of resources, through building partnerships, and what are our strategies, and including on issues that may be sensitive.
Okay. Now, and just to give the listeners a sense of how much work is being done by the United Nations, it's a network of 24 organizations represented in Jamaica, both resident and non-resident. So there's a lot of work. Quite a number of organizations work together. So this is a wonderful organizational network of people who really have to learn how to relate with each other so that they can then pass on their ideas to governments in a way that makes them more readily acceptable, and then to move into the communities and find acceptance among members of the community as well.
You put it so beautifully. That's precisely what it is. Because if we work at the level, what I said, we work very closely with the government of Jamaica, but we also work with other stakeholders until we are able to reach those particular stakeholders. To give you just a small example, in one of our meetings yesterday, and one of my colleagues said that what keeps us most excited in our work is that we are trying to change the lives and livelihoods of Jamaicans. And that's the question I take to bed every day, that did my work impact those lives? And that is what the staff, the team, that's why it's a wonderful team to work with, that everyone is very committed, that we are committed to bring forth through our comparative advantages how we can work closely with the government so that at the end, the work is done by the people of Jamaica, work is done by individuals in Jamaica, but we all do it together, and it contributes to overall improvement of lives and livelihoods.
And I can well imagine how difficult this is, because you have to have a coordinated response to global issues as well. Let us take, for example, news coming out of the United States that they have some 70 cases of measles across 6 states. This is cause for people to sit up and pay attention. And then, of course, you would have had last year the Ebola crisis coming into this year. These are issues that I would imagine that the UN is really concerned about, and then has to mobilize its people to develop an awareness among them as well.
Absolutely. When both the cases, measles, it came to my notice yesterday, but Ebola, you're absolutely right, and it's still going on. We've worked at two levels. One was where every agency made a call to its individuals that who would volunteer to go to the countries which are afflicted with Ebola, because we need, sometimes there's a need for capacity. You need some capable people, and so we try to get them together at the focus and the hub of the activity. Second thing then becomes, okay, how are we going to make sure that in the countries we are present, that they start preparing at the very, how we build that particular preparedness. And as a coordinator, I need to make sure that the preparedness is then led by the agency that has the comparative advantage in this, and that in this case, it's PAHO WHO. And they then work very closely with Ministry of Health, and I do always keep myself informed and participate in those activities to make sure that slowly but steadily we are moving in the right direction. And, as you know, the UN doesn't bring a lot of resources. There are resources that are coming from multilateral banks and several bilateral donors. But in terms of knowledge, in terms of human capital, in terms of skills, in terms of the best practices, and of course some catalytic resources, we try to initiate those things that will ultimately contribute to, in our case, achieving Vision 2030 Jamaica.
Okay. I want to turn my attention then to some of the activities that you'll have over the year. It is a good time to be celebrating. We are certainly seeing good developmental changes taking place in certain parts of the world. We have to still at the same time be concerned about others that are facing challenges. But as you take a look back, you're also looking forward. What is on the agenda this year in terms of the UN Days to be jointly celebrated in 2015, which I know this year will take on added significance?
Yeah, there are practically, I think if I look at the entire calendar of UN Days, I can safely say that nearly 90 days there must be UN, which the General Assembly tells us there are days. So for us it becomes important that to bring up those days We call them celebrations in the sense it's a commemoration of what we have done, what we have achieved, what the country has done, raising issues, engaging the stakeholders. And what I'm very grateful to you, Ms. McKenzie, that this is a wonderful opportunity, because I do believe that we need to meet and talk with the people more often. We just need to reach out to them, and I hope that these days serve to reach that, not only to mention, even it gives us an opportunity to reciprocate this wonderful government's hospitality to us and all the facilities that they provide to us when we come and work here along with the wonderful community of Jamaican people. This year, women's issues are very important. So, Secretary General has not only made statements on gender equity, but also the fact that, he's made very, very powerful statements against gender-based violence. So Women's Day is very important for us. In fact, if you would look at the policies of most UN agencies now, they are very much gender equity-based, because if all senior positions in the UN were filled by competent women today, even then we won't have gender equality. So that becomes very important for the UN and across the world, I would say. So International Women's Day, which is on 8th March, it is extremely important. Of course, and then our UN Day, which is 24th October, which we are very proud to be United Nations in Jamaica, and then working with the government, who has played such an important and a leadership role in several issues at the United Nations, working very closely with them, but also highlighting those activities that can be built upon, where people can see what's going on, and we can receive some feedback from others what we need to do. The 25th November then is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, which is extremely important, because this is, while it is a gender-based issue, but it is also an issue of violence that goes against the spine and the core of social cohesion.
Yes, and I notice more and more now, Dr. Kashyap, there's also mounting discussion about violence against men.
Absolutely.
Because that has been on the increase as well.
Yeah, that's why it's called gender-based violence. Yes. Because gender, once upon a time it was called, women-based violence and women equality and all. Now we talk about gender equality. The reason it was called gender, because then it includes both men and women. You are absolutely right in pointing that out for the listeners, that yes, it also is taking care of all that violence, across gender, across vulnerable communities, wherever it is happening, in whatever form, we need to stand up and speak up against it. And it is only, through this kind of advocacy, bringing it all together, talking to the people, finding out solution to that, and I'm sure we can achieve it. The 1st December then is the World AIDS Day. World AIDS Day becomes important for Jamaica, because Jamaica still they have made significant progress, I must say, in reducing the whole impact of HIV/AIDS, but it still is one of those countries that is, we have to work on this issue, and so we do activities with the communities on the World AIDS Day. And finally, the Human Rights Day, that goes at the core of all our activities and our existence.
That is where it all began, and and you all come back to that point when you have discussions.
Yes, indeed.
We leave the discussion there, but I look forward to more discussions with you going forward. This has been very enlightening, and I do trust that many of our listeners would have learned quite a bit this morning about the work of the United Nations and the importance of the work that you're doing, not just here in Jamaica, but globally. Thank you so very much, Dr. Kashyap.
Ms. McKenzie, thank you for having me, and I remain at your disposal.
All right, thanks much. Dr. Arun Kashyap, UN Resident Coordinator, Resident Representative of the United Nations Development Program in Jamaica, the Bahamas, Bermuda, Turks and Caicos, and the Cayman Islands.